After another hour, I stretched my arms and checked my phone. It was close to 9 p.m. Outside, the street was quiet. I stood up and walked around my cubicle. I looked out the window again. This time, I caught a glimpse of something similar in a window on the floor below the one I had seen before. The same kind of shape. It looked like a person's silhouette moving behind the glass. It was dark, but I could see the movement clearly. The figure didn't stay long. It drifted out of view. My heart rate picked up. I wasn't imagining it. Something was there. I tried to think of a reason. Maybe some maintenance worker was inside. Maybe someone from security had decided to check something over there. But we had moved out years ago, and the place was sealed off. The property manager's office was empty. There shouldn't be anyone inside. I took a deep breath. I wanted to calm down. I decided to keep watching for a bit. Over the next 30 minutes, I saw the figure appear 2 more times. Each time it showed up in a different window. Sometimes it moved left to right. Other times it just stood there before disappearing. I couldn't see any details. I saw no clothing style, no facial features, just a dark human-like form. By now my hands felt a bit clammy. I wiped them on my pants. I decided I had to check. I wanted to prove to myself that I was just seeing things. I couldn't focus on my work anyway. I left my desk and made my way down the hallway. The lights were on sensors, so as I passed, they flickered on with a slight buzzing sound. The hallway smelled like old carpet and stale air. At the far end of the hall, there was a door that led to a connecting walkway between our building and the old one. That walkway had been locked for years, but I knew there was a small window there. I thought I might get a better look inside. I walked slowly, listening to my own footsteps. My shoes made soft thuds on the carpet. I approached the door. It was locked, as expected. Through its narrow window, I could see the walkway and beyond it the old building's steel door. There were no lights, and everything looked gray in the dim glow of a distant exit sign. I saw no one inside. I pressed my forehead against the glass and cupped my hands around my eyes. Nothing moved. I pulled out my keys. I didn't have the key to the old building, but I wondered if I still had the key to the walkway door. Our company never collected some old keys. I tried one, then another. One of them turned. The lock clicked, and I opened the door. The cool air of the walkway came in. It smelled musty. I stepped inside. My heart was beating faster now. I didn't know why I was doing this. I guess I wanted to settle my mind. I walked across the walkway and tried the old building's door. It didn't budge. I shined my phone's flashlight through the small window in the door. I saw a hallway inside. There was old linoleum on the floor, cracked and dirty. A few chairs were stacked against the wall. There was dust everywhere. My light reflected off old metal fixtures. No sign of movement. I stood there for at least a minute. I listened. I heard nothing, not even the hum of air conditioning. It was silent. My stomach felt uneasy. The silence felt heavy. I took a few steps back and checked the windows of the old building that faced ours. From this angle, everything looked empty. The windows were covered in grime. I couldn't see any interior lights. I couldn't see any shapes inside. I told myself I must have imagined it. After a moment, I decided to go back to my office. I locked the walkway door behind me. I walked back through the hallway to my desk. I felt a slight ache in my lower back. I sat down and tried to focus on my work again. The spreadsheets looked the same. I typed a few numbers, checked some data, but I couldn't concentrate. I looked out the window again and I saw it once more. The figure was now on a higher floor in the old building. It didn't move much this time. It just stood near the window. I couldn't see eyes or a face, but I felt like it was looking at me. I swallowed hard. The figure then walked out of sight. I felt a sweat forming on my forehead. My breathing was shallow. I stood up and walked to the window, leaning close, trying to see better. I pressed my palms against the glass. The glass felt cool. While I stared, I saw my own reflection. I looked tired. My shirt was wrinkled, but my reflection looked a bit off. I noticed that in my reflection, it looked like there was a shape standing behind me, off to the side. I turned around fast. There was no one there. I turned back to the window and checked again. In the reflection, I saw only myself. The shape behind me was gone. My heart was pounding. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. Nothing was there now. I told myself I was seeing things because I was tired. Maybe I needed some fresh air. I decided to go down to the lobby and step outside for a few minutes. I shut down my computer and grabbed my jacket. The elevator ride down was quiet. The building's lobby was mostly dark, with only a couple of overhead lights near the security desk. The security guard's booth was empty. Our building's night guard usually made rounds. I didn't see him. I pushed open the glass doors to the street. The air outside was cool. I looked up at the old building from the sidewalk. All dark windows, nothing moved. No sign of anyone inside. I walked around the block once, just to clear my head. I listened to the distant sounds of cars on a main road. A streetlight buzzed. A loose sign rattled in a mild breeze. Nothing strange happened outside. When I got back to the building's entrance, I felt a bit calmer. I decided to finish my work and go home as soon as possible. It was late anyway. Back in the elevator, I tried to relax. My floor was silent. The lights were dimmed. I moved quickly back to my cubicle. I sat down and glanced at the old building's windows. Nothing there. I started working through the last few tasks. After about 20 minutes, I felt more at ease. Maybe I had imagined the figure. Maybe it was my own reflection and my eyes were playing tricks on me. Suddenly, there was a short flicker in my overhead light. I looked up. The fluorescent tube sometimes did that. I ignored it. I turned to face the window again. The figure was back. It appeared closer now, maybe in one of the windows aligned more directly with my cubicle. It stood still this time. My chest felt tight. I tried to focus on its shape. It looked like a person wearing dark clothes, but I saw no details. Then the figure moved out of sight again. This was too strange. I decided to record a video with my phone. I positioned my phone's camera at the window and waited. About a minute passed. The figure didn't appear. I cursed under my breath and lowered the phone. I stood up and walked to the window once more, pressing myself close to the glass. I saw my reflection again. This time my reflection was clear. I could see my tired eyes, my short hair, my loose tie. Then I noticed something in the reflection. The background behind me looked different than my actual office. In the reflection, it looked like the lights behind me were dimmer, and the layout of desks was off by a few feet. I turned around, and everything was normal. I looked back at the glass, and now my reflection matched the real room. I felt a dull pain in my stomach. I stepped back and stared at the old building. I noticed one of its windows was now slightly open. I hadn't noticed that before. The windows were supposed to be sealed. I waited to see if anything would happen. Nothing did. The open window stayed as it was. I sat down again. I decided I had done enough work for the night. I shut down my computer completely, packed my bag, and got ready to leave. Before leaving, I gave the old building one last look. No figure. No strange reflection. On my way out, I stopped by the walkway door again. I don't know why I bothered, but I wanted to be sure. I unlocked it, stepped inside the walkway, and tried the old building's door one more time. Still locked. I shined my phone's flashlight through the window. Inside looked the same as before. Dusty floors, stacked chairs, darkness. I was about to turn away when I noticed something on the floor inside. There were footprints in the dust. They looked recent. They led from the far end of the hall toward the door I was looking through. I brought my face closer to the window, squinting to see better. The footprints were faint, but definitely there. They ended just before the door, as if someone had stood right there, inches from the other side of the glass. I stepped back quickly, my heart racing. I looked around the walkway. Nobody there. The door to my building was closed behind me, but I had the key. I felt warm sweat on my back. My mouth felt dry. I backed up toward my building's door, never taking my eyes off the old building's door. Nothing moved. I tried to breathe quietly. I listened for any sound. There was only silence. I opened the door to my building and locked it behind me, then hurried back down the hallway. The lights flicked on as I passed. I reached the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. While I waited, I looked back down the hallway. Everything was still. The elevator arrived, and I stepped inside. I pressed the button for the lobby. On the way down, I rubbed my face and tried to steady my breathing. In the lobby, I found the security guard. He was sitting at his desk, looking at his phone. I asked him if anyone had been inside the old building next door. He shrugged and said he hadn't seen anyone. He said the old place was locked up. He seemed unconcerned. I nodded and left. I didn't want to explain everything to him. I just wanted to go home. Outside, I looked up at the old building one last time. The open window I had seen before was now closed. All the windows were dark and still. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder and started walking toward my car, parked around the corner. My legs felt weak, and my hands were shaking slightly. I kept looking over my shoulder at the old building. Nothing changed. It stood silent and empty. I got in my car and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment, listening to the engine idle. I checked my phone and saw the time. It was past midnight. I drove out of the parking lot. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the reflection of the buildings behind me. Everything looked normal. I tried to push the images out of my mind. I wanted to forget what I had seen. I could still feel that tightness in my chest. The idea that someone or something had been watching me felt too real. I gripped the steering wheel and focused on getting home. I moved into this studio apartment about 2 weeks ago. The place was small and plain, just one main room with a bed in the corner, a simple wooden table against the opposite wall, a small kitchenette near the entrance, and a tiny bathroom. I had a single window facing a dark alley. The floor creaked near the door if I stepped too hard. The walls were thin, and I could hear my neighbors shuffle around sometimes, but I couldn't see anyone through the hallway peephole except on rare occasions. The hallway lights buzzed when I came home late from work. Nothing seemed unusual in the first few days. Everything felt ordinary. Then I started waking up at exactly the same time every night. It happened around 3 in the morning, give or take a few minutes. My eyes would open and I would feel my chest tighten. I would feel goosebumps on my arms. My heart would beat faster than normal. I kept thinking I heard soft breathing from near the door, but I didn't have proof. When I tried to focus, I heard nothing but the soft hum of the mini fridge. Sometimes I could hear the neighbor's TV if it was left on, but that was muffled. Still, every time I woke up, I had this feeling that someone was standing right there at the door. The door was only about 6 feet from the foot of my bed. I never saw anything when I looked. The door was always closed, the doorknob in place. I didn't see shadows. I didn't see movement, but the feeling kept pressing on me. After a few nights of this, I started to get anxious. I remember one particular night I woke up again at that same time. My mouth felt dry. The skin on my neck felt tight. I reached over to my phone, turned on the flashlight, and shone it at the door. The door looked normal. Nothing weird, no marks, no noise. I got up, walked over to it in my boxers, and put my ear against it. The hallway outside was quiet. I considered opening the door, but I didn't. I just stood there, heart pounding, staring through the peephole. The hallway light was dim as usual. I saw nothing out there. After a few minutes, I went back to bed. I fell asleep again, but not quickly. The next day at work, I felt groggy. I kept thinking about that feeling at night. I began to wonder if maybe I was having some weird dream or some stress reaction, but I didn't think so. It felt too real. My body responded too strongly every time. I decided to take some steps. I went to a cheap electronics store after work and bought a small motion-activated camera. It wasn't fancy. It was the kind hunters sometimes use to see if animals pass by. It had basic night vision and could record short clips when it detected movement. I brought it home, set it up on top of the small table facing my bed and the door. I tested it by walking around the room, waving my hand, making sure it recorded. It did. The clip stored on a small memory card that I could play back on my laptop. I felt a bit silly, but I was determined to see if something was actually moving around in my apartment at night. That evening, I turned out the lights as usual at around midnight. I lay in bed staring at the door for a while. I kept the small camera's status light turned off, so no one would know it was recording. The studio was dark, and I could just make out the shape of the door by the faint glow coming from the window. Outside, a distant street lamp gave the room a soft, weak light. I drifted off to sleep eventually, my thoughts scattered. I woke up again at around 3 in the morning, the same weird feeling crawling up my spine. I shot up in bed, breathing fast. I didn't know why I felt so panicked, but I did. I couldn't see anything unusual in that darkness. My heart was thumping. My forehead was damp. I reached for my phone and checked the time. It was 3:07 a.m. My throat felt tight. I sat there and listened. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. After a few minutes, I managed to lie back down. I didn't want to look at the camera yet. I waited until morning. When I got up after sunrise, I almost forgot about the camera. The room looked completely normal in daylight. But then I remembered what happened. I took the memory card out of the camera, inserted it into my laptop, and scrolled through the recorded clips. The camera had recorded several short videos. Most of them were me moving around before sleep, or me shifting in bed. But one clip, timed around 3:05 a.m., caught my attention. The camera had turned on and recorded for about 10 seconds. In that clip, I saw my bed in grainy night vision, me lying asleep. Then suddenly I shifted, and right at that moment, there was a faint shape near the door. It wasn't clear. It looked like a dark smudge or a vague outline. It moved slightly from left to right and then out of frame. It was too blurry to identify. It could have been a shadow from the hallway. But the door was closed, and I didn't see how a shadow from outside would appear inside like that. I sat there staring at that clip over and over. My heart started racing again. I felt a tightness in my chest. This wasn't my imagination. Something triggered the camera. That meant something moved inside the room. Something was there. I checked the front door lock. It was locked. I checked the window, which was about 6 feet off the ground outside. No fire escape, no balcony, and it was locked too. The bathroom door was closed, and no one was inside. I opened the closet. Nothing. I stood in the center of the room, listening to the hum of the fridge. Everything was quiet. I felt nauseous. I decided I should do more. I went out and bought another small camera that afternoon. I placed one camera near the table facing the bed and door as before. I placed the second camera near the kitchenette, facing toward the door and part of the main room from another angle. I wanted more angles to see what the hell was going on. I also replaced the batteries in the first camera. I tested both. They worked fine. I tried to keep calm that evening. I watched a dumb TV show on my laptop, tried to relax. I didn't drink alcohol. I wanted to have a clear head. I turned off the lights at midnight again and lay in bed staring at that door. I focused on the sound of my own breathing, the quiet hiss of distant traffic through the window. I fell asleep eventually. Again, I woke up around the same time. I opened my eyes and felt a rush of panic. My heart was pounding in my ears. I could feel sweat collecting at the base of my neck. The room was silent, but I felt a presence. I looked toward the door. There was no obvious shape this time. I didn't see movement. I just felt it. I sat up, reached for my phone, shone the light. Nothing. The door and the walls were bare. The table was where it should be. The kitchenette looked normal. I saw the tiny camera lights off. Everything seemed still. After a while, I went back to sleep, but it took a long time. In the morning, I checked the footage. Again, there was a short clip around that same time. Both cameras had recorded something. On the first camera's footage, I could see myself sleeping. Then I started to stir. Right before I moved, there was this blur in front of the door, like a faint vertical shape that passed quickly. On the second camera's footage, I could also see a dark, faint shape near the door, but from that angle, it looked smaller. It was a quick flicker, just enough to trigger recording. I paused the video and tried to look frame by frame. It was just a vague shadow. I couldn't identify anything like clothing or a face. I checked the door again. The lock wasn't tampered with. The chain was in place. The deadbolt was engaged. I examined the door frame. I pressed against it. Solid. No hidden panels. Nothing loose. I checked the walls around the door. Everything was solid. I tried to push on the window, see if maybe someone could open it from outside, but it didn't budge. The outside ledge was too narrow for anyone to stand on. I had no explanation. For the rest of that day, I felt on edge. I tried calling the landlord, but he didn't answer. I didn't want to sound crazy. I just said I had a small issue and wanted to talk. I left a voicemail. I tried talking to a neighbor I ran into in the hallway. He was a guy around my age. I asked him if he'd heard any strange noises at night. He said no. He said he worked late sometimes and hadn't noticed anything unusual. I asked if anyone else had complained about break-ins. He said not that he knew of. I could tell he thought I was acting weird, so I dropped the subject. That night, I didn't know what else to do. I locked the door carefully, closed the window, turned off the lights, and lay in bed. I felt dread building up inside me. I was tired, but also too wound up. I must have drifted off at some point because, right on cue, I woke again in the early morning hours. This time, my skin felt cold and clammy. I sat up immediately, flicked on my phone's light, and aimed it at the door. I jumped out of bed and walked slowly toward it. My legs felt shaky. I reached the door and pressed my ear against it. I heard nothing. I tried the knob, still locked. I put my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. I looked back at my bed. I didn't see any movement in the room. I flicked the light switch on the wall. The overhead bulb lit up. The room looked normal. I turned the light off again and went back to bed. I didn't sleep well. In the morning, I checked the footage again. Both cameras had recorded something. This time, the shape looked a bit different. It seemed closer to the door, a bit larger. It hovered there for a second and then disappeared. I couldn't tell what it was. It had no clear outline. It was like a patch of darkness shifting around. It made no sound. It left no trace. Watching the footage made my stomach tighten. My hands felt sweaty. I slammed my laptop shut and paced around the room. I decided to stay awake the next night. Maybe if I was awake at 3 in the morning, I'd see it. I made coffee and sipped it while browsing random websites to kill time. I kept the lights off. By 2:30, I felt jumpy. By 3, I was wide awake, staring at the door, phone in hand. A few minutes passed, and I felt that same tension crawl up my back. My shoulders felt stiff. The hair on my arms stood up. I aimed my phone's camera at the door, recording video. I didn't see anything at first. But then, out of the corner of my eye, something seemed to shift near the lower right side of the doorframe. I aimed the light there. Nothing. The feeling got stronger. I breathed through my mouth, trying not to shake. I recorded for a full minute, but caught nothing. Finally, I gave up and tried to sleep. The next morning, I reviewed my phone video. Nothing. The cameras, though, picked up the shape again. This time, it lingered a bit longer. Maybe 2 seconds. I saw it hover near the door as I lay awake in bed. It was there even though I didn't see it with my eyes. This freaked me out. I couldn't figure out what was happening. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? There was no sign of a break-in, and I had no clear evidence of a person. It was just a weird shadow. I couldn't call a friend and tell them. They'd think I was losing my mind. I tried the landlord again, but he didn't call back. I checked online for any news about strange break-ins in the area. I found nothing. I started feeling trapped in that studio. Every night it was the same routine. I locked the door, turned off the lights, and tried to sleep. And every night, around the same time, I'd wake up terrified and see nothing while the cameras recorded this faint, shapeless figure. I bought a flashlight and kept it next to the bed. I aimed it at the door when I woke up, but I never caught anything. The cameras were the only ones that detected it. I tried sleeping with the overhead light on. That night, I still woke up, felt uneasy, and the cameras still recorded something. The shape looked even more distorted under the light, but still there, flickering in the corner. My body started reacting to these nights. I had headaches during the day. My muscles felt stiff. I would snap at people at work. I had trouble focusing. I wanted to solve this. One night I pushed my table close to the door before going to sleep, so if anyone tried to come in, they'd have to move the table. In the morning, the table was still in place. No one had touched it, but the cameras caught the shape again, near the top of the door this time, as if it hovered above it. Another night I set up an old phone as a third camera on the windowsill, facing the door from another angle. Same thing. Each camera recorded the shape, slightly different each time, never clear, always fading in and out. I never heard it speak. I never found footprints. I never felt a breeze or smelled anything. It was always silent and just barely visible. Yet I felt it every single time, like a cold needle pressed into the back of my neck. After a while, I stopped trying to catch it in the act. I just wanted to get some sleep, but that never happened. Every night around 3 in the morning I would wake up. My heart would race, I would look at the door, I would feel someone there but see nothing. The cameras would record a small glimpse of that thing, whatever it was, and that would be it. I tried ignoring it, but it didn't stop. I tried leaving the TV on for background noise. Didn't help. I tried moving the bed to a different corner of the studio. Still the same feeling. I tried sleeping on the floor. Nothing changed. The cameras kept catching that faint shadow. After about a week of this, I accepted that I had no explanation. It was happening, and I couldn't make it stop. Now, I still live here. The shape still appears almost every night. I still wake up at the same time. I still feel my heart pound when I look at the door. I still play back the footage in the morning, and there it is, moving slightly, fading in and out, leaving me with no answers. I keep the door locked, I keep checking the window, but I find nothing that would explain it. I've stopped calling the landlord. I stopped telling anyone. It's just me, living with whatever this thing is, and I have no idea what it wants. I moved into the house on a Saturday morning. I had boxes piled up in the front hall and old furniture wrapped in plastic scattered across the living room. The place smelled stale, like it had been shut for a long time. The windows were dusty, and there were uneven floorboards in some rooms. There were a few spiders in the corners. The paint on the walls was chipped, and the wiring seemed old. The attic was above my bedroom. I knew this from the layout the realtor gave me. I had not gone up there yet. I planned on checking it out after I settled in. My first few nights there were quiet enough. I noticed that the house creaked a bit when the wind blew outside. The walls were thin, and I could hear the pipes humming when I turned on the bathroom sink. Late at night, I sometimes heard small noises coming from above. At first, I thought it could be squirrels or maybe the wood expanding. The noises were not loud, just light tapping or a soft knocking sound. Sometimes I would stand in the hallway, looking up at the ceiling, trying to pinpoint the exact spot. But I could never be sure where it came from. It always seemed to be somewhere just above my bedroom. One night, around midnight, I lay in bed with the light off, thinking about work and the furniture I still needed to arrange. The tapping started again. It was a slow, rhythmic sound, like someone lightly tapping a fingernail against a hollow door. I turned on my bedside lamp and stared at the ceiling. The sound paused. I waited, listening closely. After a few seconds, it came again. A series of 3 taps, then silence, then 3 taps again. I got up, walked out into the hallway, and looked up at the hatch that led into the attic. The hatch was in the small corridor that connected my bedroom to the spare room. I had a folding ladder leaning against the wall, the one I used when I painted the kitchen ceiling. I decided I should finally look inside the attic. I was nervous. I felt my chest tighten a bit, and I noticed my palms were sweating as I grabbed the ladder. I positioned it under the attic hatch. I climbed up and pushed the hatch door open. A musty smell came down. I shone my flashlight inside. It was dark, dusty, and cramped. I saw wooden beams, old boxes, and what looked like a broken chair. There was also a large mirror leaning in a corner. The glass on the mirror looked cloudy. Its frame had peeling paint. I stuck my head up and looked around, but I saw no movement. I heard nothing. I stayed quiet for a minute, shining the flashlight slowly over everything. Then I climbed back down and closed the hatch. I did not see anyone or anything unusual. I went back to bed and fell asleep after a while. The next night, I heard the tapping again. This time, it sounded a bit louder. It happened around the same hour. I got up faster this time. I opened the hatch and climbed into the attic. I aimed my flashlight around. Nothing moved. I walked carefully, ducking under beams. My boots kicked up dust from the floorboards. I felt cobwebs brushing against my arm. I saw the same mirror in the corner. The surface of the mirror had a film of dust, but I could still see a bit of my reflection when I moved close. I approached it and wiped the surface with my sleeve. As I did that, I thought I saw something behind me in the reflection, like the shape of a person. I spun around quickly, shining the flashlight into the darkness. There was no one. I looked back into the mirror, but all I saw was myself and the dark shapes of the attic's beams. I backed away, keeping the light on that spot. Nothing moved. I went back down again, feeling uneasy. My heart was beating faster than normal, and I had a tight feeling in my stomach. I slept badly that night. In the morning, I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination. I had been tired, and the attic was dark. Maybe the reflection was just my own shadow. The tapping could be old pipes or wood. There were a lot of possible explanations. Over the next few days, I arranged more of my belongings. I fixed some light fixtures and swept the floors. The house was quiet during the day. I never heard anything unusual before sunset. But at night, usually around midnight, the tapping returned. It seemed to come from the same area above my bedroom. Sometimes it was 3 taps, sometimes 4 or 5. When I climbed up to check, I found no animals, no loose pipes, nothing that could explain the sound. I started to feel anxious as bedtime approached. On the 5th night in the house, I decided I would stay in the attic for a while, waiting. I went up around 11:30 p.m. with a flashlight, a small chair, and my cell phone. I set the chair facing the mirror. The mirror was in the far right corner, leaning against a sloping part of the roof. I sat about 6 feet away from it. The attic was silent except for a slight humming sound from the distant traffic outside. I waited, breathing slowly. My back felt stiff, and the dust in the air made me want to sneeze. I tried to stay calm and alert. Around midnight, I heard a soft tap. It came from somewhere behind me. I turned, shining the flashlight, but I saw only boxes and a bundle of old cables. I heard another tap, this time in front of me. I looked at the mirror. I felt a sudden chill on my arms. I got up and approached the mirror, leaning forward to inspect it. As I shone the light on it, I saw a reflection that did not match what was behind me. Behind me, there should have been an old box and a wooden beam. In the reflection, I saw a person's shoulder and part of a head. The shape looked solid. I could see what looked like dark fabric. I spun around. There was nothing there, just empty space. I felt panic rising. My breathing got faster and I stood very still, listening. I took a few steps backward, away from the mirror. I tried to calm down. I checked my phone for a signal. I had a weak signal, but I could call someone if I needed to. I did not know who to call. The police would not care about some strange reflection in an old mirror. I was not sure what I had seen. It could have been a trick of the light. I decided to cover the mirror. I found an old sheet in one of the boxes. It smelled like mold. I shook it out and draped it over the mirror's frame. Then I went back downstairs, closed the hatch, and locked my bedroom door. I did not sleep well. I felt restless, and my throat was dry. In the morning, I tried to ignore it. I told myself I might have been half asleep. That night, I heard the tapping again. I tried to ignore it, I stayed in bed holding my pillow. The tapping got louder, then stopped. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a small knife, and held it while I listened. There was no more tapping. I waited a few minutes, then put the knife down. I felt ridiculous holding a knife. I was not in any immediate danger. I just felt unsettled. The next evening, I decided to face it again. I went up to the attic earlier, around 10 p.m. I wanted to see if anything had changed. I climbed up quietly. When I shone the flashlight around, I saw that the sheet I had placed over the mirror had slipped off on one side. It was still covering most of the mirror, but one corner of it was pulled back. I had draped it securely, so it was strange that it had slipped. The attic windows were sealed, and I had not felt any strong drafts. I approached the mirror and fixed the sheet. I took my time, making sure it would not slip. I then walked around the attic, checking for any openings, loose boards, or animal droppings that might explain the noises. I found nothing unusual. It was just old boxes, some old furniture parts, and dust. I left the attic and went back to my bedroom. I lay down and stared at the ceiling. At midnight, the tapping started again. This time I jumped out of bed, grabbed my flashlight, and climbed up. I wanted to catch whatever was causing this. I opened the hatch. As soon as I stuck my head inside, I heard a rustling sound near the mirror. I pulled myself up fast and aimed the light. The sheet was halfway off the mirror again. I froze. I had just fixed it. I approached the mirror slowly. My heart was pounding. I could feel sweat on my forehead. I reached for the sheet. Suddenly, in the reflection, I saw a face. It had eyes and a mouth. The eyes looked focused on me. I saw short hair and a neutral expression. I felt my legs tremble. I turned around quickly. Nothing was there. I turned back to the mirror. Now I only saw my own face in the attic behind me. I took a step back and almost tripped over a box. I was breathing through my mouth, trying to stay calm. I decided to speak out loud. I said, "Who is there?" My voice sounded shaky. I waited, but I heard nothing. I walked backward until I reached the hatch. Then I climbed down, closed it, and pushed a heavy box on top of it. I wanted to block it off. I could not think of a better solution at that moment. I sat in my bedroom chair for about an hour, just staring at the ceiling. I did not want to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I finally lay down. I kept the lamp on. I dozed off after a long time. For the next few days, I avoided the attic. The noises above continued every night. I tried to watch TV, use my laptop, and ignore it. I started considering leaving the house, at least for a while, but I had nowhere else to stay. I had just moved, and my budget was tight. I also felt I needed to understand what was happening. Maybe there was a logical explanation. On the following Saturday, I decided to record what was happening. I set up my phone's camera in the attic during the afternoon and left it there facing the mirror. I left the sheet off this time so I could capture anything unusual. At midnight, I heard the tapping again. I stayed downstairs, pretending to ignore it. In the morning, I climbed up, grabbed my phone, and checked the recording. The video was long and showed only darkness at first. I advanced through it. At around midnight in the video's timeline, I saw the sheet start moving on its own. It slipped down slowly. After a few minutes, it stopped. Then the phone's image showed a faint shape moving across the frame, just a slight shift of shadows. It was hard to identify. When I paused the video, I saw something that looked like a shoulder passing in front of the camera. It was hard to make out details. There was no sound other than my own steps when I left earlier. I felt a chill. Something was definitely happening. I went back up later that day with a screwdriver and some nails. I decided to remove the mirror, or at least move it to another part of the house. I gripped the side of the mirror and tried lifting it. It was heavier than I expected. I managed to tilt it forward. Behind it, I saw a small gap in the wall. The gap looked like a hidden compartment. I shined my flashlight inside. There was a folded blanket and an old jacket in there. The jacket looked dusty and worn. I pulled it out carefully. It smelled old and damp. I placed it on the floor. I reached back inside but found nothing else. I lifted the mirror again. intending to carry it out, but as I pulled, I felt sudden resistance. It was as if someone was pulling it back from the other side. I let go. The mirror fell back against the wall. I tried again, but it refused to budge. I was angry and confused. I pressed my shoulder against it and pushed. It did not move. I stepped back, breathing heavily. My arms were sore from the effort. I shined the flashlight on the mirror's surface again. My reflection looked pale and tense. I looked closely, checking every detail. I could see my sweat, the dust on my shirt, the trembling in my fingers. Then for a split second I noticed another face over my shoulder. I turned around instantly, but I was alone. I stood there facing the mirror, trying not to panic. I spoke again, louder this time. "I don't know who you are or what you want," I said. My voice echoed slightly in the attic. There was no response. I grabbed the old blanket and jacket and carried them down. I thought maybe these belonged to someone who once lived here. I left them in a corner of the hallway. I planned to throw them out later. That night, I locked my bedroom door. The tapping came again. It sounded louder. I put on headphones and tried to ignore it. After a while, it stopped. In the morning, I checked the attic again. The mirror was still there, leaning against the wall. I did not see any faces this time. I did not hear any noises. I placed a heavy dresser under the attic hatch just in case. I did not want to be surprised again. Over the next week, I still heard tapping at night, but sometimes it was softer, sometimes it was louder. I never saw the figure in the mirror as clearly as before. Sometimes I noticed slight movements on its surface, but when I looked directly, I only saw myself. I tried spending less time thinking about it. I focused on cleaning the rest of the house. I fixed a broken window latch. I replaced some light bulbs. I tried to move forward with my life inside this place. I still do not know who that figure was. I have not tried to break the mirror or do anything drastic, but I have considered it. For now, I am just living with it. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and hear a few taps. I think about that face I saw. I get up, drink some water, and wait until I feel calm. So far, nothing has harmed me. It is just unsettling. The attic remains as it is, and the mirror is still up there, covered with a sheet that does not always stay in place. I still see no reason for what is happening. It might continue as long as I live here. I never found a neat explanation. I never found any records or papers that would clarify it. I have stopped trying to force answers. I keep a flashlight and a hammer in my bedroom drawer, just in case I need them. The tapping still comes at night. Sometimes I wake up sweating, remembering that face behind me. Sometimes I think I should leave this house, but for now I stay. The old attic is above me with that mirror and whatever else is there. I go on with my daily life and try not to think about it too much. I started my walk a little after sunrise. I remember the sky being clear and the air feeling cold on my face. I took the same trail I always took, a narrow dirt path that ran through a patch of dense forest behind the old campground. Normally, I never ran into other people that early. I liked that. I liked the quiet. That day, I noticed something off as soon as I passed the row of tall pines on the left. I heard low voices. At first, I thought it might have been the wind or maybe some hikers far ahead. I slowed down and listened. The sounds were coming from the trees on both sides, but I did not see anyone. The whispers were soft, but they did not fade when I stopped walking. When I started walking again, they seemed to get louder. I tried to ignore it. I took a deep breath and looked back at the empty trail. There was no one behind me. I could see clear footprints, my own from when I first came in, and a few scattered pine needles on the ground. Nothing else, no movement, just my footprints in the damp soil. Yet the whispering did not stop. The voices sounded very low, almost like a soft breath right behind my ears. They were words I could not understand. I could not pick out a language. They were more like quiet breaths shaped into strange sounds. I walked forward. The trail was straight for about 30 feet, then it curved sharply to the left. As I approached the bend, the whispers grew louder. They seemed to move with me, staying just out of sight. I stopped again and turned around slowly. I stood still, listening, scanning the trees. I saw the morning light between the trunks, patches of moss, damp leaves, and the rough bark. I saw no movement, except for a squirrel darting up a tree far off to the right. I heard my own breathing, uneven and shallow. I noticed that my hands felt cold and my fingertips were a little numb. The hairs on my arms stood up. I tried to speak. I said, "Hello?" My voice sounded strange in the quiet. The whispers paused for a second, but then they started again. I could not pinpoint the source. It felt like they surrounded me. I raised my voice. "Who's there?" Nothing answered clearly, just more quiet sounds that resembled whispers. They did not stop. They only faded a little, then came back stronger as I took another step. I felt a knot in my stomach. I was not sure what to do. This was a public area. There could have been people messing around. Maybe someone was trying to scare hikers. That idea crossed my mind, so I tried to catch them. I moved off the path, stepping over some roots and pushing through a thin set of bushes. I tried to move quietly, looking for anyone crouching behind the trees. I found no one. I saw a few old branches on the ground, some small holes where animals might have dug. I saw wet leaves and a large spider web stretched between two low branches. But no people, no sign of a person hiding. When I stepped back onto the trail, I listened again. The whispers were still there. They had not changed in tone. They were steady, low, and constant. My chest felt tight. I tried to calm myself. I told myself to keep walking and see if it eventually stopped. I walked another few yards. The forest looked normal. The path was a bit muddy from rain the night before. My boots sank slightly as I stepped. I kept my eyes straight ahead. The sunlight filtered in, but the forest still felt dim under all those leaves. I moved at a steady pace, but every few seconds I glanced over my shoulder. No one was there, just an empty trail behind me, the way I had come. The whispers seemed to react to my movements. When I walked faster, they got louder. When I slowed down, they softened. They never went completely silent. They never sounded friendly or angry. They just sounded neutral, but persistent. That bothered me. I could not figure out what they wanted. I tried talking again. I said, "I know someone is out there." My voice shook a bit. "Can you just stop? This is not funny." I waited, but the whispering continued. No response, no laughter, no running footsteps. Nothing. My breathing got heavier. I felt a light sweat forming at the back of my neck. I ran one hand through my hair and noticed my hand was shaking. The trail ahead looked the same, just more trees, more damp ground. I knew there was a small clearing about half a mile ahead, where the trail opened up near a broken fence and some old signs. I decided to head there. I thought maybe if I got into a more open space, I could see who was doing this. I wanted to solve this. I wanted it to end. As I walked, I focused on the details around me, trying to spot something unusual. I saw leaves moving in a gentle breeze. I heard a crow calling somewhere far off. The ground smelled like wet soil and old wood. I heard small twigs snapping under my boots. The whispers did not match any animal sound I knew. They did not match the wind through the branches. They were too deliberate. They had a pattern, a human rhythm without clear words, but definitely human-like in tone. I pushed forward. My shoulders felt tense and my lower back started to ache slightly from the way I was walking stiffly. I tried to relax, but every time I eased up, the whispers reminded me that I was not alone. I checked my phone, hoping to see if I had signal. I pulled it from my jacket pocket and looked at the screen. No bars, just the time glowing back at me. It was still early, not even 7 a.m. I cursed under my breath and put the phone away. I kept moving. My heartbeat felt faster than normal and my mouth felt dry. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my breathing quiet. I did not want whoever was out there to sense my fear. I tried to walk normally, not too fast, not too slow. I felt the weight of each step in my legs. As I approached the clearing, I could see more light ahead. The trees thinned out a bit. The whispers did not fade. If anything, they grew clearer in that thinner patch of trees. I could hear the slight intake of breath, a gentle hiss at the end of each whisper. It sounded like more than one voice, maybe two or three, all blending together, whispering just out of sight. I reached the clearing. It was just a small opening in the forest where the trail split in two directions. On the right, a path led up a slight hill. On the left, a broken wooden fence separated the trail from a thick patch of brush. I stood there and turned slowly in a full circle. I took my time looking at every trunk, every shadow. I saw nothing, just silence except for those whispers. They were still there, following me like an echo without a source. I stepped toward the fence. It was about waist high, with a few boards missing. Beyond it, I saw more forest floor, ferns, and a fallen log covered in moss. I listened. The whispers sounded very close, but I still could not see anyone. I leaned forward, peering between the tree trunks. My heart was pounding, and I could feel my hands sweating. I wiped my palms on my pants and tried to steady my breathing. I decided to call out again, louder this time. "I know you're out there. Stop messing around. Show yourself." My voice sounded angry and a bit shaky. The whispers paused for a moment. I held my breath, expecting something to happen. But after a few seconds, the whispers started again, just as low and persistent as before. I felt my stomach tighten. I realized I was clenching my jaw. I needed to do something. Standing there would not help. I stepped back onto the main trail and started walking again. I chose the path that led uphill. It was steeper and less traveled, but I thought maybe I could get a better vantage point from higher ground. The dirt was loose under my boots, and I had to be careful with my steps. I grabbed a tree trunk to steady myself as I climbed. I felt the rough bark under my fingers and a bit of moisture from the dew. Halfway up the slope, the whispers grew louder again. They stayed behind me, always behind me. Every time I turned, I saw nothing, just emptiness. The forest looked the same in every direction. I felt a growing sense of frustration mixing with the fear. I wanted to catch whoever was doing this. I wanted to know why they were following me and whispering instead of talking like a normal person. As I climbed higher, I noticed that the air felt thinner. My breathing got heavier and my legs felt a little sore. I forced myself onward. The trail narrowed, and I had to watch my step around some exposed roots. I kept scanning the trees. The bark was dark with moisture, and the ground was covered with brownish needles. Every time I turned around, I looked carefully at the pattern of trunks and branches. I tried to memorize them in case something moved. Nothing moved. Nothing made any sound except the whispers and my own breathing. I did not even hear many birds anymore. Just an occasional distant call, but mostly nothing. Just these strange, steady, quiet voices always trailing behind me. At the top of the slope, the trail leveled out. I could see a small patch of sky between the treetops. The morning light was brighter now. I wiped sweat off my forehead with the back of my hand. I stood still and waited, breathing slowly. The whispers were still there. They sounded like they were coming from no specific direction now, as if the entire forest around me carried that sound. It was unsettling. I realized I was not getting anywhere by going deeper. Maybe I should turn around and head back. The idea of going back down that trail made me uneasy, but staying out here without a plan did not seem smart. I decided to head back to the main area near the campground and see if I could find other people. Maybe if I got near a busier section of the forest, these whispers would stop. I turned around and started walking back down. The slope was tricky. I leaned back a little, careful not to slip. The mud stuck to my boots. My footsteps sounded loud compared to the whispers. I tried to ignore the sounds and focus on getting down safely. Halfway down, I paused to catch my breath. The whispers never left. They hung in the air like a constant reminder that I was being watched. I continued until I reached the clearing again. I looked around, hoping to see another hiker, a jogger, anyone. It was still empty. The trail leading out of the forest was a good 20 minutes walk. I started walking that way. I decided to push through and get out of this place. I kept my eyes on the path ahead. The ground was still damp, and I felt a slight chill despite my body feeling warm from the exertion. The whispers seemed to follow. As I moved forward, they remained behind me, always at the same distance. I tried to trick them. I suddenly spun around, expecting to catch someone behind a tree. I saw only trunks and leaves, nothing else. My heart sank a bit. I felt a lump in my throat. This was not normal. Even if someone was pranking me, they would have to be incredibly good at hiding and moving silently. And how did they keep making that whispering sound without me seeing their lips move or their shadow shift? I shook my head and kept going. I stepped over some exposed roots and tried to pick up my pace. My boots squelched in a small puddle. Water splashed onto my pant leg. I barely noticed. I just kept moving, hoping the exit was near. The forest floor and the dense trees made it hard to get a sense of distance, but I had walked this path many times before. I knew that eventually it would open up near a gravel road. Once I reached that gravel road, I would be close to the parking area and the entrance. I would feel safer there. As I pressed on, the whispers continued. They never changed in tone or volume, just matched my speed. When I moved quickly, they stayed loud. When I slowed, they quieted slightly. They seemed linked to my motion. I tried stopping completely again. I held my breath and listened. The whispers did not stop. They just hovered at that same level, waiting. I started to feel a bit dizzy. My stomach felt queasy. I could feel sweat on my forehead and between my shoulder blades. My hands were shaking. I did not want to panic, but I felt close to it. My throat felt dry and I wanted water, but I did not want to stop. I just wanted to leave. I saw a familiar fallen tree that I recognized from previous hikes. I knew I was close to the edge of the forest. Just a few more minutes and I would reach the gravel road. I pushed forward, ignoring the pain in my legs and the tightness in my chest. I clutched the straps of my backpack, holding on to something solid and real. Finally, I saw the tree line thinning out. I saw the grayish color of gravel through the leaves. I almost laughed with relief. I walked faster, ignoring the whispers. They stayed behind me, constant, but I focused on the way out. I stepped onto the gravel and felt small rocks crunch under my boots. I looked around. The open space felt good. The road was empty, but at least I had room to move. I turned around and looked back into the forest. The trees stood quietly. The whispers were still there, faint, but now they sounded more distant. I took a few steps back toward the forest line and listened. The whispers got louder again. I stepped back onto the gravel and they softened. I realized they seemed tied to the forest. If I stayed on the gravel, they were weaker. I took a deep breath and wiped my face with my sleeve. I looked up and down the gravel road. There was no one around, but I felt safer. I could still hear the whispers, but now they seemed weaker, as if blocked by the open space. I stood there for a few minutes, catching my breath and calming myself. My heart rate slowed down. My muscles felt tired and heavy. I could still hear a faint whispering if I strained my ears, but it no longer felt like it was following me. It just sounded like a distant, strange noise coming from deep in the forest. I decided to leave. I turned and started walking down the gravel road toward the parking area. Every few steps I glanced back, half expecting something or someone to appear at the edge of the trees. No one did. The morning light felt warmer out there. I could smell something fresher in the air. Maybe just the open breeze instead of damp forest floor. My shirt clung to my back and my legs felt shaky, but I kept going. I just wanted to reach my car and get away. As I walked, the whispers faded more and more. After a few minutes, I could no longer hear them at all. All I heard was the crunch of gravel and my own footsteps. I reached the parking area. My car was there, the only one. I opened the door and got inside. I locked the doors and sat still for a moment, breathing quietly, feeling the steering wheel under my hands. I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw nothing unusual, just empty road and trees beyond. I started the engine and pulled away. My hands were steady now, and my breathing was normal. My throat still felt dry, and my clothes still felt damp with sweat, but I was safe. The whispers stayed behind in that forest. I did not know what they were or why they followed me, but I did not care anymore. I was done. I left that place and drove home in silence. I did not plan to return anytime soon. I moved into the house on a quiet street a few months ago. It was a shared place with 3 other tenants. The landlord lived upstairs in a separate unit. The rent was reasonable, and the location was okay. The house had a long hallway inside and a few doors on the ground floor. One of those doors led to the basement. From the first day I arrived, that basement door stood out. It had a large padlock on the outside and thick hinges. The paint around it looked a bit rough, as if it had been repainted several times over the years. The landlord told me that the basement was off limits. He said he stored old equipment down there, things he did not want us messing with. I did not think about it much at first. I had my own room on the ground floor facing the backyard. I shared the kitchen and living room with the other guys. We were not friends, but we got along fine. I kept my stuff tidy and tried not to bother anyone. I had a 9-to-5 job, so I was not home very often during the day. At night, I would come back, eat something, and then hang out in my room. Sometimes I watched TV in the living room, and on a few occasions, I noticed that basement door. It was always locked. The padlock looked old but solid. A few weeks after I moved in, I started noticing something strange about that door. There were scratch marks on the lower part, on the inside. I saw them one day when I came home early and the door to the basement was slightly ajar. I do not know why it was open. Maybe the landlord had gone down there for some reason and forgot to lock it completely. I only noticed because I walked down the hallway and saw a thin sliver of darkness through the crack. Curious, I approached. I pushed it a bit, and the door did not budge much because the padlock was still in place on the outside hinge, but loose. I looked through the gap and saw scratch marks on the wood. They were small, shallow, but there were many of them, one over the other, forming this uneven pattern that looked like something had been trying to claw its way out. I got a chill. I did not know what to make of it. My first thought was that there might be an animal trapped down there. That night, I waited until the landlord was outside smoking, and I casually mentioned that I had seen the basement door slightly open. I said I noticed some damage inside. He just smiled and said, "It's just some structural adjustments I had to make. The wood is old. It scrapes when I try to fix the frame." He shrugged and waved it off. I looked at him carefully, and he avoided eye contact for a moment. I had a weird feeling, but I did not push it. He seemed calm enough, and I did not want to start any conflict. Over the next week, I watched that door every time I left for work and every time I came back. It stayed locked, and I never saw it open again. But after a few days, I noticed more scratches, deeper this time. I saw them after the landlord called a handyman to reinforce the door. I heard them working out there one afternoon. There was drilling, hammering, and some scraping sounds. When I came home, the door looked different. The hinges had been replaced, and the frame looked sturdier. The padlock had been switched out for a new one. But when I peeked at the inside edge again, I saw fresh scratch marks, as if something had scratched the new wood. I felt my chest tighten. I had no reason to be scared, but I was. My palms felt sweaty, and I had trouble sleeping that night. I tried to push the thought out of my head. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the handyman had used a tool that slipped and scratched the wood. That made some sense, but I was not fully convinced. In the following days, I started paying attention to sounds at night. Around midnight, when everything was quiet, I sometimes heard a faint scraping sound. It came from that direction. It was not loud, and I could not always be sure. The house had old pipes and floorboards. It might have been something else. Still, I could not relax. After a few more nights, I decided to investigate a bit. I waited until everyone was out. It was a Saturday afternoon. The other tenants were at their jobs or out doing something. The landlord was gone too. I tried to open the door, It was locked tight. I got down on my knees and ran my fingertips over the edge of the door, feeling for the scratches.